let's go. Okay. So we're live now and just waiting for a couple people. Maybe some folks will join us if they see this. Maybe they won't. We will see. All right. So far we've got one viewer, and that's probably me. I don't know. We'll see. But I think we can start, and then we can see who is hopping on and interact with folks that way. If everybody's seeing this after the fact, after the stream is over, this will be still up on the channel. We might edit it just a little bit, and we'll try to be a little bit, more consistent next time and announce this a little bit more ahead of time. So hopefully that'll be the case next time, so you'll get a chance to interact with us a little bit more. But if you are going to be in the chat, folks, feel free to chat with myself and Nathan here. Hello. So, for those of us that are joining us, and there's 5 people now, welcome, welcome. We've got Nathan Walker here, who is part of the NativeScript TSC. He is also part of NStudio, who is working hard on building NativeScript. If you don't know that already, welcome, Nathan. Do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Thank you, Alex. Yes, we have been wanting to do an upgrade video like this for quite some time. We're particularly going to focus on a very old NativeScript 6 project. So we hope this will be pretty informative for those who may have old projects lying around that they want to update to the latest. So I say we dive into it, Alex.
All right, let's do it. So what we are doing today, just a quick introduction. I've got this old project, which is a NativeScript 6 project. So if we take a look at this, you'll see that we have a TNS, a NativeScript section in package.json, which has a TNS Android version 6 and a TNS iOS version 6. And if we go down to dependencies, we've got some UI dependencies there, and we've got dev dependencies, dev webpack, which is old, and all the stuff we're going to upgrade and migrate today. All right, so if anybody is using NativeScript 6, hit us up in the comments, let us know, and let's begin. Where should we start this?
So probably a couple things you want to check on your own system. I think it's always good to take a look at Node, look at what Node version you're at. You really want to be on Node 12 or higher for most things. It's totally safe to use Node 15. Latest in NPM 7 as well, so you're welcome to install latest Node and use that. So let's start with looking at Node. Let's do Node V, see what version we got. We've got 14 on this system here. 14 is totally fine, so we can actually start a migration from here. Again, you're welcome to install Node 15, should work exactly the same. If you're on Node 12, should work just fine as well. So just Node 12 or higher. So first thing you want to do is install the latest CLI, because that's going to give us the ability to use the migrate with the latest. So npm i-g NativeScript, and you can use the @latest identifier, or by default it should pull latest either way. Does not matter. But for those who are perhaps newer with Node and NPM in general, you can always use the @identifier to specify a particular version here. Also, while this is installing, we might recommend using some type of Node version manager. We can see on this system NVM is in use, which stands for Node Version Manager. It does allow you to switch in between Node environments pretty easily. So here it says we have the latest CLI installed now. We can confirm that by doing ns-v, and it should tell us for sure. So we do have 802, and I think from NativeScript 7 and beyond, anytime you run nsv, it also does an auto update check, so it'll tell you if there is a newer version out that is available to install. So this is telling us we are up to date. So we are inside the root directory of this old NativeScript 6 project. The first thing you want to run is just ns migrate.
Okay, let's do it.
And fingers crossed, if this goes well, it should do most heavy lifting for us. There will be some manual things to do, so that's why this will be particularly interesting to look at here. But looks like this is proceeding through pretty normal here, updating some dependencies, sending up the new webpack config. Migrate with NativeScript 8 is always going to take you all the way up to webpack 5. So it's the latest and greatest of everything. NativeScript Core 8, NativeScript webpack 5, and it looks like it did succeed. You can see it applied ESLint fixes too. So there's an ESLint plugin that another TSC member, Stanimira Vlava, actually added in NativeScript 8, and it auto runs some import modifications against your old project to try and update a few. And it gets a good majority of them. Just depending on the project setup, it probably won't get all of them. But let's now have a look at what we've got. Let's take a look at the project.
All right, let's hop over to the project. We have 61 changes, and let's take a look at all of them here.
So it's always good to probably look at the package JSON first and just take a look at kind of what happened here. It did pull, let's see, NativeScript cores on 8. It changed the main to point towards app.ts. That's one key thing with Webpack 5 in particular, is Webpack 5 uses a direct path to the main bootstrap file. That's now typical with all JavaScript projects if there's a main. So it's nice to have that point to a literal file that actually exists now.
And that's pointing over here to this file.
That's right. And that is your bootstrap file.
Mm-hmm.
And we can see there's some red squigglies there that we'll take a look at in just a moment.
Mm-hmm.
So the other thing, after you run NSMigrate, it's good to take a look at your dependencies just in general. You know, I think dev dependencies down there is a couple things that jump out. Like, for instance, Node SASS is no longer used or recommended anymore. So you can actually swap that with SASS. SASS is the recommended package if you're using SASS nowadays. You can use Carrot, and I think the latest is 1.32, or yeah, you can use the latest there, 1.34. And then you can remove Node SASS. That one is no longer used. And you can leave a caret on SASS there. It should be safe.
Or a caret, okay.
Should be safe. We use a caret ourselves, so we recommend using a caret. On the rest of the dependencies there, all that looks good, except for types. Type should be on 8.0, so you can change that to a tilde 8.0 there. The migration, I believe, does touch that on some. So again, if you see that your types is not on the latest, just use tilde 8.0 there is what it should be. UI side drawer, let's highlight over that and see what the latest version is there. You can go ahead and use tilde 9.00 there.
And not 903, 900?
Tilde is going to pull the latest patch, so it totally depends on your preference. But yeah, tilde 900 is going to pull always the latest patch, so that would get 903. UI data form, let's take a look at that one. And we're just going to kind of go up the line here in VS Code. We can use tilde 7.00 on that, and we're just going to bump all of our dependencies here to the latest. UI chart, let's take a look at that. It looks like tilde 8, so you can just change the 6 to an 8 there. And theme core you can leave that way for now. NativeScript Sentry, let's take a look at that. 201, so you could probably go to 201 on that. And then NativeScript Localize was scoped, I think since NativeScript 7, so you can probably change that to @NativeScript/localize.
And for those folks that are not familiar with what the scoping is, can you just briefly, real quickly talk about that?
Yeah, this was a tough decision for kind of everyone on the TSC, and whenever NativeScript 7 was introduced, which was ESM bundling, and we were leaving CommonJS far behind, the tricky decision was how to leave latest versions on ES5, because many people are still using old NativeScript 6 projects, and they'll probably work for quite some time. And so we didn't want to have latest versions on CommonJS base just kind of automatically start going to ESM, since ESM, partakes a certain setup in your TS config, and it's, you want everything to be on ESM. So we made a decision to scope kind of all the core plugins under the NativeScript scope, and those would all be ESM and beyond. And so generally for any core plugin that was out there, and when we say core plugin, those are generally those that were hosted under the NativeScript org on GitHub. Those became scoped and then started bundling with ESM. So you can rely on the fact that anything scoped under NativeScript is ESM compatible. And that's generally going to be building with ES 2015 and beyond, whereas NativeScript 6 and lower was all CommonJS and ES5. So that's what that's about.
Okay, gotcha. All right, so we've got a few scope packages, including the core. I guess we can just organize this a little bit better, but we can do that later. So what else should we do here? I mean, there's also this whole migration backup folder. We talked about that when we did the video on migration from 7 to 8, but maybe these folks haven't heard about that yet. So what is this folder and what's in here?
Yeah, a migration backup is always generated when you run NSMigrate, and that is making a backup of any files that are either swapped, changed, removed. It'll leave a backup there, so you can always refer to them. Typically in the past, what would largely be a good reference there is your webpack config, since previous versions 7 and below would always maintain a pretty large webpack config, and different projects may manage different aspects and customizations through that. So NativeScript 8 and beyond with webpack 5 use a much simpler webpack config, all based off of webpack 5 now. So
Whoa.
it should be, yeah. So quite a bit easier to maintain. The environment that's passed any init there sets up a base config, and it does analyze your project to determine what type of project. So it'll typically look at the flavors that you're using, whether it's Vue, React, Angular, or Svelte, and it'll set up the base config appropriately. This is basically what the old configs did, but they put it all in front of you, which meant that any customizations you made into it, and thus any modifications that the core team made to Webpack, you would then have to try to reintegrate back in. And because they were so large and unwieldy, it was pretty hard to do. And just hard to keep track of. So this just simplifies all that. You can still customize all the same customizations from here, and on NativeScript docs, there's a lot of great examples of customizations, particularly common customizations that are made here.
Yeah, this looks pretty simple. I like that.
Let's see, what else is interesting to look at here? Perhaps the TS config, you can take a peek at that. When I was talking ESM, what we're talking about is that module and that target there. You can see the modules now ESNIX, the target's ES 2017. And of particular note, line 24 down there, module resolution node. You'll notice in old NativeScript 6 projects, there is no module resolution, or at least often there was not one. And the difference would be the ES, the target and the module would be set to ES5 in CommonJS. So yeah, that's one other change. And that really came from NativeScript 7 and beyond. So really not a whole lot changed between 7 and 8. And there really won't be a lot of change between 8 and 9 even in that regard as well. In fact, the whole ESM base kind of aligns with modern JS standards. So there shouldn't be a whole lot of big changes there in the months and years to come.
Okay. So we've got the migrate command completed. Is there anything else we need to do, or is that it?
Well, we're probably in a broken state right now because ESLint did manually modify some imports, and it did some heavy lifting for you, but probably not all. So at this point, actually, let's do one thing in tsconfig. You can remove lines 20 to 22 right there. That star on node modules is really no longer needed. It's not going to hurt you. You can certainly leave it there in tsconfig, but it's also no longer needed. So you can remove that. Remove that trailing comma there too, because that would be invalid JSON syntax. You can save all of that, and let's check the references D. The references D is, yeah, so we need to modify this.
Yeah.
We want to swap TNS platform declarations is something that is no longer used. That became at NativeScript types, so that's also scoped with all of the new stuff. And you can actually, well, yeah, you can retype it if you want. It would be /node modules at NativeScript, so also scoped, /types, and then /index.d.ts. And the index pulls in iOS and Android implicitly. So those types give you a good bit of control as well if you want to dive into certain like Android API levels. But with that set right there, that'll give you the default iOS and Android types for NativeScript, and you can remove those now. That global definition on Node you can remove as well. We shouldn't need that.
I think that's the project uses it. Do we not need that if the project uses this declaration?
Let's check if it does.
I think it does at some points.
If it does, you can leave it. It shouldn't interfere. So let's leave it for now.
Okay.
If you're one out there that has something like that in your references, you can just leave that. If it interferes, we can deal with it later, but I think it will be just fine. Okay.
There's one more thing. What is this NativeScript config.ts? I know what it is, but for those folks that are seeing it for the first time, it's all highlighted in green and it's new. So can we touch upon this real quick?
Sure. So NativeScript config was introduced in 7, and it is the centralized place for all the NativeScript config. Prior to NativeScript 7, it was managed in a couple places. There was like a key in the package JSON that was a NativeScript key, and that managed like your runtimes. And then there was another package that was like embedded in the app or source folder, and that managed different runtime settings. And it was honestly pretty confusing. So NativeScript config consolidates that all together into one spot, and that's the only place you need to look for that sort of stuff.
I like the NativeScript config. It's in TypeScript. I can understand it, and it's probably typed, right? So you can kind of gather what types are there and explore the API of what you can configure.
It is strongly typed and annotated with description. So if you type IntelliSense in there, it should tell you what different settings do and that sort of thing.
Nice. All right. So what's next?
So the next thing is you could probably run it at this point, and we will expect to see some errors, and we'll deal with them one at a time. So first, since we made some changes to the package, always run ns clean because we were just kind of messing around with our dependencies there. So just run an ns clean. That'll make sure we kind of reset the project.
All right. Project successfully cleaned. Hey, for those folks that are just joining in, we are doing a migration from NativeScript 6 to NativeScript 8 on an old project.
Really old.
Yep, so Eric asked that, and thanks for asking, Eric. Yeah, that's what we're doing today. We've already done the ns migrate command, which is the first step, and we went over what changes that made. So now we're trying to build. So ns clean ran successfully.
So now you can just run it. And again, at this point, always when you're migrating an old project, you should expect to see some errors here because you will. Like I said at the beginning, NS Migrate will do a lot of heavy lifting for you, but depending on how big your project is, depending on how much kind of customization that you did in there in different practices, it probably won't get it all, but it will get a good majority of it. So when we run, this should kind of tell us the state of where we're at and kind of what we want to look at next.
All right, and this is the part where we do a little bit of waiting while the simulator pops up and the build happens. And while we're doing this, we can take a look at some of the questions that you folks have. Let's see. SoCal Television, hello. Guilherme says, awesome audio and video quality. Finally, we did it. This is the first live stream on this channel that's actually live, so welcome, folks, to those of you that are here live. SoCal Television says, I'm having an issue adding TNS or NS platform, add Android or iOS to my vanilla.js blank template build. Ever since I upgraded to NativeScript 8, it tells me in the command line bash ns is not found. Could this be an NVM thing?
It sounds definitely node related. It could be environment setup related. You might want to check bash profile or Z shell settings there too. Just might make sure which node will always tell you if node is kind of in a standard or non-standard place. That's usually in user bin, or it might be referencing something from your home directory, like .mdm in your home directory.
Okay.
Those are some things you can kind of check out and kind of poke around at your node environment setup and just make sure everything there sort of looks normal.
Okay. So we'll get back to some of your questions. And folks, if you do have more questions, just pop them in there in the chat and we'll review that. Right now, I am doing a build, and you might hear my laptop fans come on, the good old Intel fans. I don't know if you hear a lot of noise. That's my fans for sure. And there is my application. It popped up, and then it quit. And let's take a look at what's going on with that.
So let's make, if you can make the terminal just a bit bigger, and then let's make the text just a tad bit smaller, just so we can see just a little bit more on screen. Yeah, you can go ahead and stop it. And always when you end up in a crash like this, again, don't be scared. This is just part of the process when you migrate. Most of the time, this is going to end because there were some build errors up above. So let's scroll up and see if we can start at the first build error. So keep going up. And we saw one reference down there, but we're just going to go up to kind of during our build here and see if there's anything else mentioned that we want to start with. Yep. Keep going. You can see a lot of this is mentioning some pretty typical import stuff. And right at the beginning, I think it mentioned something about the CSS or SASS. So that's probably a good place to start.
Where is that? I should probably just scroll all the way up here. Okay. Here we go. Copying the files. And this is probably the first one, right?
Yes. So that delegate, we'll take a look at that issue. Probably the first thing before we get into the TypeScript itself is probably to look at the CSS and SASS. One thing when you migrate to latest, with Webpack 5 at least, you want to remove tildes on the CSS and SASS imports. So let's look in your project for those first. Probably open the apps CSS file.
Okay, and that's right. Wait, do I have an app CSS file? It's been a while since I looked at this project.
Yeah, right there. Those tildes on line 5 and 6.
So we get rid of the tildes.
Get rid of the tildes. And then you probably have the same in the app.android, I would guess.
Yep, there it is. Let's do that.
And then check the other CSS file, SCSS files there. Let's see what else. Yep, you want to remove that tilde as well.
So Webpack 5 doesn't like these tildes.
That's right.
There we go. Theme. And this one's okay. I think that's it.
Okay, let me double check. Go back to app variables. Yep, that should be fine. Let's see. Go back to app common real quick. Yeah, that looks okay. We might want to import app variables at the top, but we'll see if it complains. We'll keep moving on and we'll come back to it.
Okay.
Let's go ahead and save all of that. And you might actually, a good way to find any culprits of tildes in your code base, do a code base search there on the whole project and search for @import import space single quote and tilde. And then you can also try double quotes, just depending if your project had double quotes too. That's a quick way to find those pretty quick. You're just going to remove the tildes. Okay.
Looks good.
So now the next thing we probably want to move into is a couple of the TypeScript fixes. So let's start in, what was it, app.ts, the bootstrap file there. I think there was a couple in there. Yes. So we can see a couple things were modified by NSMigrate, but not all of them. So for instance, we can actually take the application on line 1 and 2, and we can convert these to just symbols from the core package. So you can take out the trailing application. Yeah, or you can create a new import either way, whatever's easier.
I'll just do a new one so we have a comparison here.
Okay. Yeah, we're going to import a few symbols. Yeah, like application is one. Let's see, what else do we want? We probably want, it's just trace.
Oh, trace.
Yeah. And you can just do @NativeScript core here. You can import all symbols from @NativeScript core. The other thing that we'll probably need, we can get it in just a sec. You can comment out lines 1 and 2. Just to go ahead and remove those away from us, or you can delete them either way. Let's see, we swapped NativeScript -localize with our scoped version, so just modify that to the scoped version. Let's @NativeScript /localize, and that works exactly the same. So if we scroll down a little bit here, I think, yeah, so see that trace module, the error handler?
Yep.
That was kind of the old ES5 module, and there's just a symbol for that, just called trace error handler. So just take out trace module dot, replace it with trace, and all that is just a type interface here for this error handler. You can remove the dot.
So it's just trace error handler.
Right, and if you type ER on the end, yeah, it should let you auto import that.
And that's coming from right here, from NativeScript core again.
Right, and everything will come from core. So line 45 right there, that's just trace. You're just using the symbol to get at the API. So you could actually make trace module work the way it was imported there, but we're just going to clean this up to use these symbols here. Those are just the actual symbol for application. Yep. And with that right there, I think we're actually done here.
There's this NativeScript Sentry plugin also.
Yeah, the Sentry plugin should be fine. I think we did still install that. It might just be that some typings that are pulled in from it are complaining, but I say either leave that or comment it out for now. One thing I always recommend on when you're migrating like big projects with a lot of different code, you know, if there's something you come across that you're just not sure about at the moment, you can always comment it out, come back to it later. Like right now, we're just kind of dealing with some NativeScript imports and just doing some cleaning up around that. And so you can always come back to this later. It's always a good thing to do during migration so you don't get overwhelmed so quickly.
Now, I do sometimes have, if it's a large project, VS Code sometimes takes a while to catch up with its IntelliSense. So there is a trick for that, right? You can restart the language server.
You can if you do, Shift, I think it's, Shift Command P, and then it's TypeScript restart TS server.
There it is, right there.
Yeah, you can do that in VS Code anytime, especially if you're doing a lot of like dependency management and, you know, VS Code stays open, you're not closing it or reopening it. That sometimes can help kind of wake up the IntelliSense, especially if you're messing with some stuff. So
yeah. And it
looks like it actually did fix
it.
Yeah.
Maybe.
You always can confirm that too by command hovering over the Sentry symbol right there.
Yeah.
On line 15. And yeah, you can see it picks up that it's a class, so
yeah.
You can actually see that it actually did wake it up.
That worked. So this file looks okay now.
That looks okay now. So let's see, the next place we want to go into, let me take a look.
I'm going to close up all these files here so we're not getting too messy.
Well, actually, let's just save all that and let's just run it again.
Okay.
We'll see where we're at. Again, we should still probably have some errors because there's probably still some imports to just touch up, but we're already on our way. And this really is part of the process. Again, installing the NativeScript CLI, the latest one, is always the first step. NS Migrate's the second step. It'll do a lot of the heavy lifting, and then the third step is just kind of, we'll say the third step is making sure your CSS and SASS imports don't have the tilde. I think that's a good third step. And then the fourth step is just kind of looking at your build output and just making sure that TypeScript errors that it's talking about are just revised. Because again, ESLint picks up a good majority of them, but not them entirely. So the next thing here, let's probably look at that first one right there, list view delegate. Let's take a look at that.
Okay. So I'm going to go here to the project and Command P. Paste
And I know
in the code.
I know for a lot of people that kind of get into, migrating and updating projects, seeing a wall of TypeScript errors always invokes a lot of panic, Um, and I would say no one's immune to that. It certainly can have the feeling of panic a bit, but it's really the great thing about TypeScript is that it's actually telling you what's wrong for the most part. Some of them can be misleading, sure, sometimes, but in large part is trying to be as verbose as possible to tell you what's going on. So let's see on the delegate here. Let's see what's going on. Yeah, so this is a great note. So right here is an example of a custom native class, and in NativeScript 7 and higher. So again, we're in NativeScript 8 here. Anything that's going to be ESM land, there was a new decorator introduced for custom native classes like this in your project. And so there's two things to consider with that. Number one, you want to decorate this class with it. It's just called @nativeClass. So you can just add @nativeClass to the top of this. Then the second consideration is, are you using that class inside this file, or are you using that class outside of this file? And what that means is that typically on line 5, that export, you're going to want to remove that. Because the native class decorator, when it compiles this in your project, it modifies the syntax. And so if you're exporting and using this outside, you want to export it as like a standard ESM class. And so you can do that below. So now scroll down to the bottom, and you can use the syntax export curly braces, and this will be the name of the class above there. So it'd be list view delegate implementation.
Okay.
And with that, you're actually done with that one now, and that's what that needed. So probably what was occurring there is the syntax was not quite correct for that on the compilation with all the latest, and it wasn't finding it, but that should allow that to come through.
All right, I'm just rebuilding this again to see what other errors pop up, just so we have a clean slate here. And
yeah, and always go to the top. So like right when you see that slew of errors, you can go to the top right there. So it's still mentioning something about this list view delegate. So let's go to the place that's actually referencing it to see how it's being pulled in there, and we can actually see part of the problem. List view delegate, it wasn't called list view delegate. It was called list view iOS in there, I think it had. So something is referencing list view delegate in there. So you might could search the code base for that. See right here, we've got
.delegate.
Yeah, search for list view .delegate.
No, it's still not coming up.
Let's in this particular case right here, let's be a little bit more direct right here, because there is a little bit of a non-standard setup with the way that this is coming in. So let's rename this to list view .delegate.
The file, right?
Right. And then let's also look for where that's pulled in. Somebody is importing that from somewhere, which is what's leading to that error. So let's take a look at where that's pulled in from. Looks like it might be coming from list view utils. Yeah, there it is right there. List view yeah, and you can see right there it was actually importing from list view .delegate. So that was just a code error in this project, by the way. So just an important note, always look out for stuff like that. But this was importing listview.delegate, and the file was called listview-ios-delegate. So just a pure project issue right there.
So it did used to work with NativeScript 6, and I guess the new workflow requires that the files are named exactly what your module import is, right?
Usually, yeah, there might have been something non-standard in that setup there. Definitely looked pretty unusual. So yeah, always check like what's actually being imported and check that that thing actually exists. Definitely. So that should take care of that one. You can try to save and run that one more time and just see if that error at the top of the stack is now gone.
Okay, we are building, and this is used somewhere else too, right? So, this is just that same file, and then the bundle also references it. Okay, so that's really the only place where we're going to be referencing it. Okay, we've gone past that point now. Now we're on app events.
Awesome. Yeah, let's go there. Let's open app events. And again, always with a stack of errors like that, start from the top, just go one down. They're going to kind of cascade and sort of fix themselves, usually in this type of, update process. Typically fixing one will cascade and fix a bunch of others. So it's always good to start at the top and go down.
And this has to do with the import of the trace module, which we already did earlier.
Exactly, yeah. So trace module just has a symbol called trace, and you could even get it from that trace module import there. But again, with 7 and above, everything is exposed from NativeScript core. So while you're doing this and updating the project, it's a good idea to just clean some of that up because it is much, much cleaner. And in fact, with all the symbols coming from that one single core barrel and not other deeper imports, will allow the core team to introduce even more helpful update processes in the future, especially if you're already using those named symbols all from NativeScript core.
Okay, I got a bunch of commented code here, so I'm going to just do a search in the code base for any instances of trace module where I can just rename that.
That's a good idea. That's a good idea. Yep. And you can see those kind of get taken care of pretty quickly.
I was doing tracing like a good little programmer, and now I have to rename those. Alright, I think that's it.
Nice. Okay, well, go ahead and save all and just run it again. Again, another recommendation always when migrating a project is after you make a change, you can kind of do one at a time and just kind of take them down one at a time. It tends to speed up exponentially as you go through it, so you can obviously continue going through looking for other red lines that VS Code may report or other things that you know of, certainly, but we'll just do it kind of one at a time here. So again, back to the top.
Okay, that's over here.
Perfect. Yeah, so nav helper, let's go into nav helper and fix that up. So topmost is, I think that was deprecated in NativeScript 6 as far as an import like that. It's actually available statically off the frame symbol, so you can import frame. And you can just, actually frame's already imported there, so just remove topmost. And then just put frame dot in front of that since it's a static method off of frame. There you go. And you can go ahead and search your code base for those two. Those are an easy fix.
Well, if I did this well, it should only be in one file, right?
Ideally. Definitely not always the case. There's a few more in popover helper.
Spoke too soon. Frame.topmost. And there we go. And I think there's another one in status bar. Okay, this is where I am importing this frame module directly. Let's take that out.
And it's worth noting that actually that path exists. NativeScript core /UI/frame, that path exists. You can import from it. But that path exports a frame symbol like this. So you could actually still use the star as frame module if you want, but frame module would be .frame because that's actually the symbol from that module. So worth noting that, I guess.
Okay. Well, it looks like I've gotten all the frames, I hope. Let's take a look at what else we need. So there's a lot of little code updates like this, basically just imports.
That's right. Yep. It's mainly going to be imports, and yeah, and this is part of the trouble with 6 and below, and why we decide to standardize all this in 7 and beyond, is because of the things just like this. Really, because of the kind of broad, wild nature of imports and deep paths from 6 and below and TNS core modules in general, it created all these non-standard imports, and everyone would do them differently, and it just creates this kind of situation where um, you're trying to guess, where things are, where they're at, and that also makes auto migration tools harder, because everything's non-standard. So, in doing this and in cleaning this up, you're standardizing your whole code base, and it will make your upgrade life much easier going into the future, because that is the whole goal with this. So yeah, let's open new item modal there. And which one was it talking about there?
It's saying something about export PT user.
Yeah, core models domain. So you can probably look in that core models domain and see what's in there. Core models domain. So it looks like line 2. You can try to click into that and then just make sure that it is there.
Yep, core models domain, and there is PT user model.
And there is an import from a dot up above there, and there's a red squiggly underneath that too. So you might highlight over that to see what it's talking about there.
That's TS-lint error.
Okay. So let's take a look at PT user. What's the name of that file? PT user model.
This is the file that's using it. New item modal vm.ts.
Let's keep moving on, because an error like this actually could be coming from something that's being imported from that barrel otherwise as well, that's causing an error, and it's just causing the TypeScript to kind of trip on itself. So you can kind of keep moving on if you run into something like that you're just not sure of, or seems confusing.
Okay, I think all these errors before this one are all kind of similar. So here's the next one that looks different, which is views, pages, root page.
Yeah, let's go to that one.
Okay, here we are. Load.
Yeah, load is not there. So that's a builder thing. You can just import the builder there. And you can go to line yeah, that's just builder.load. So load is kind of like what topmost was, where topmost was sort of a floating symbol. Before load was kind of one of those two very generic, agnostic. You can only have a million load methods in a code base, I guess. But that's just off the builder. So yeah, you could also search your code base for any references of those and just make sure it's from builder.load.
And this makes a lot more sense, because now we just don't have a global function randomly hanging out. We have actually a builder instance.
Right. We can see another right there, line 16. You can just delete that. Yeah, that's just an old TNS core module. Layout base still exists on NativeScript core, so you can just import layout base from NativeScript core. You can either auto import it, or
there we go.
Yeah.
Layout base.
Let's see, that probably takes care of that page. You could go ahead and try to run again if you want, or we can just continue looking at the code there.
I think there was a CSS issue coming up. Let's take a look if that pops up again. All right, while that's building, let's see if we have any folks talking to us. Eric says, I just finished separating my Angular NS shared code project to an Angular NS monorepo with shared library. Thanks to Yarn Workspaces, everything went smoothly. That's cool. I haven't seen it done with Yarn Workspaces yet. Have you seen something like that, Nathan?
I have not. I have not. No, that sounds interesting for sure.
That is interesting, yeah. Well, congrats on that smooth upgrade.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds really neat, actually. Yeah, so app common. Let's go back there, because this is what I was mentioning actually earlier. let's import app variables there. So we can see it's actually saying undefined variables, so the variables need to be referenced. There's probably here, there might be something a little odd with the SAS structure. So we're just going to make sure that variables are defined in this case and just using the error to tell us exactly. So just do an import of app variables right underneath there. Yeah. App dash variables. I guess it is. Yeah. Perfect. You don't need the extension on it. Yeah. Okay. That should take care of that. You could either let's actually go through the rest of your stack there. Let's see if anything else of interest pops out. Right there, dashboard page VM. Let's go ahead and open that file. That looks like just, you can actually, yeah, search your project right now for TNS core modules. That'll help find a lot of the outliers.
Package lock, the good old package lock.
Yep, that one is fine. That one's fine. Here we go. Yeah, and this is probably the most efficient way to get at them in a large project. Just search for TNS core modules, and most of these you're just going to flatten out their symbols. Yeah, NativeScript core, this will just be utils, so you can import, there's actually just a symbol called utils, and that has all the same stuff on it. This one right here, platform module, we can swap with the screen and device right there. So you can go about that a couple different ways. You can leave, let's leave platform module because I want to show people this actually does still work that way.
Okay.
So you can still use like line 2, it's totally fine. Again, it just depends on how much cleaning up you want to do. There is a symbol called screen, I believe it is on core, which you can also get at main screen from there. But it's capitalized. So line 36 to 38, the only issue is that you just want to capitalize that screen in there. Change that to capital. And then
oh, it's coming from platform module? Oh, there it is.
That's right. And it's actually just a symbol called screen. So you can import that directly from NativeScript core, or you can still use the star as platform module. It really doesn't matter. It's actually the same thing.
Okay.
So just showing
which one is preferred? Which one does the team recommend?
It's preferred to import all the symbols from NativeScript core. And typically why that's preferred is that just standardizes all your NativeScript imports. And that's only going to make your upgrade life easier going into the future.
So that would be something like this, right?
That's right. And it's exactly the same. It actually would work exactly the same. But if you're really cleaning up and you want to standardize that stuff, you can definitely do that.
And same thing with device.
Right, you can see device is the exact same. Yep.
Nice. I like that. It's cleaner.
Yeah, and just so anyone who's listening knows, with all kind of standardized symbols that are coming off of NativeScript core, all of our migrate processes going forward in the future can analyze your project better. And so when new symbols change or breaking changes occur or modifications of symbol names occur, migrate can now effectively analyze your project and auto-migrate those automatically for you. Previously with TNS core module imports, like I was saying, with sort of the wild import styles that varied from project to project, made auto-migrations like that tricky. So yeah, that's really part of why this standardization has taken place.
Okay. What is this thing with observable array here? I guess that's the next TNS core module. Oh,
yep.
Yeah, there's more of these.
Yeah, it looks like we got a few more. That one, it looks like you can just take layout base out and just drop it in the import above because it's same symbol, same name, just importing it from the a standardized barrel there. Yep.
Okay, and then it doesn't like keyboard type and animation promise.
So keyboard type is one of those that's in the core types. So there's been a new roll-up of, there's a ton of types that were floating around core for a long time, and they were growing really a bit out of hand. All that was rolled up into core type. So you can actually just swap, take out keyboard type and import a roll-up called core types, and inside of that kind of has all of those standard types. So you can take out keyboard type. Animation promise, let me check that one.
So this is going to be core types dot keyboard type? No.
Let me double check. I think it's keyboard import type. So there's keyboard input type is all those possible. Yeah, there it is right there.
So the naming changed a little bit too. Animation promise. Let's see where that wants to come from. It wants to come from NativeScript core UI animation. Does that look right to you?
Sorry, my son had to ask me something there.
Hey, the joys of live streaming. No worries.
Animation promise, just auto import that. Just do SE on the end, and yeah. So you can see, like, for instance, animation promise probably will end up being exported out of the main barrel, but in these cases, it's totally fine. If you come across a symbol that is not in the main barrel, and this is a great example, that works just as well. That probably will be rolled up in future patch versions, but it's totally fine to use that.
Okay. And we got a couple of other things here, like layout base again. So let's get that in here. Actually, that's coming from core, so we can do
yeah, a lot of times if I'm updating a project, you know, an old legacy project like this, you can copy and paste the symbols just into the modern barrel. Remove, like that one right there, just cut that symbol and yeah, drop it there, and then you can remove the old import. Done. Moving on. Same deal here, cut the symbol, drop it in the
that one we don't even need, it's not used here, so we can just delete it.
Symbol.
Okay. And we shouldn't get any more complaints about TNS core modules.
We shall see. We shouldn't. But yeah, now we can kind of see what else we're dealing with here. See if we still got something around those PT user models.
Okay.
Great. So yeah, those are warnings up there. Those actually aren't to build errors, and so we can take a look at that in a moment. But usually what that's referring to with Webpack 5 is it's importing like an interface, but there's not a concrete implementation. And so ESM is trying to find a concrete object there, but there isn't one. It's just an interface. It's TypeScript. Flattens all interfaces, don't compile down to anything there. So now, so we can ignore those warnings for now because again, they don't matter, and we can look at the build error here. So we got app config undefined. So let's search the code base for app.config and let's see who is referencing that. And we can see right there. And we can see it references a global TNS environment. So aha, we came across our first interesting thing here on a legacy project. So the global right there, that's why we left that in the references.d. If you open your references.d, the reason you don't have red squigglies there is because I believe you have an augmented type in your references there. So yeah, open the references.d file.
Okay. And that's interesting because when I pressed F12, it navigated me here instead.
Yeah, because global is always going to reference that sort of global node, but you can always augment it in your projects. I think if you command click on the TNS environment variable off of that, where you were, app config, I think it will take you to the augmentation. You can try that. Try command clicking the TNS env. Let's see.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's why you don't have red squigglies on it. So here is a Webpack 5 thing. So we just want to make sure that that environment variable is added. That's a an old legacy environment variable. We can either change it or we can keep it the same. It doesn't really matter. Go to docs.nativescript.org and we'll take a look at how to do this.
I should have had this ready.
It is quick to jump to, so we're going to go right to Webpack right there on the left-hand side, and there's some great references in here. Let's make this window a little bit wider because there's a pretty helpful sidebar on the right.
All right.
There we go. So
sorry about my dog, folks, if you can hear that coughing. That's my dog.
Wow. Coughing dog. Examples of configurations right there on the right-hand side. These are some great examples of pretty common things like this is a very common thing that we need to do right now, and this is define plugins. So scroll up a little bit. I think that, yeah, right there, extending the define plugin options. Define plugin is used for exactly what we need here: global environment configuration variables. So you can actually just copy and paste the center section of that webpack config.
This?
You could copy, yeah, you can copy and paste the whole thing if you want, but we just want that center because that's the example that we need. And we want to go to our webpack config, and we're going to drop that in the center of our webpack config here.
Okay, this is getting interesting now.
It is.
Not that it wasn't interesting before. It was interesting all throughout, but this is like pretty advanced stuff now, no? Or is this?
I mean, it's pretty just standard webpack stuff.
Mhm.
Pretty standard, boring webpack stuff, to be honest.
But it's nice to see that it's like right here on the documentation page that you can just grab this from here and use it.
Yeah, and there's probably things out there that folks are doing in Webpack in older versions that may not be mentioned there. Feel free to ping or create an issue on GitHub, and we'll try to add examples of those things up there too. But we tried to add most of the common examples, and this was yet another common thing that folks out there did pretty often. So that global.isProduction, we don't need that flag because that's not the flag it's complaining about. It's complaining about global.tns_env. So you can change that global.isProduction to global.tnsenv. That's the one we want to define.
Sorry, my dog came in and now he wants my attention. In case you haven't met him before, he's right over here. He's really adamant. Let's get back to this. Sorry, can you repeat that again?
Change global.isProduction to global.tns_env. And if you look at your, what was it, app config file that was referencing that thing, you'll see that there.
This is what's actually what I tried to define here, right? Using this old method.
That's right. Well, that's not even defining it. That's just defining the typings for it, which is very different than actually defining it in the runtime. I guess it's runtime versus build time.
Mm-hmm.
This would help your build time, but it's not going to solve your runtime.
So this is where I'm using it.
Right. And so we can see what it's trying to do there, right? It's trying to set the environment name to some value, which we can see on the left, your results there. You've got dev as a value and you've got prod as a value there.
Yep.
So what we're expecting in the runtime is that TNS environment should be defined in our build as dev or prod. So what tells us if we're in prod or dev? Well, that is that environment production flag. So go back to the Webpack config and we can actually fix this up for your particular legacy project here. So bang bang environment production, that's going to return a Boolean, which is fine if that's what you want, but it's not what we want in this case. We actually want a prod string, or we want a dev string, because again, we can see on the left, your app config is trying to reference a .dev or .prod. So what you want to use is JSON stringify here. So do a JSON stringify in front of that and pass your environment production into that. But instead of just passing that, that would just give us a string of true or false. We don't want a string of true or false. We want a string of prod or dev.
Right.
So we want question mark string prod, and then otherwise we can do string dev and then close our stringify. And now if you run that, we actually should get a string in our runtime that represents a proper prod or dev based on our Webpack build.
If anybody in the comments or in the chat uses this kind of setup, let us know. Just curious to see who else is out there doing this.
I'd be curious how many out there doing that too. That's not particularly uncommon. I think Vue projects use a global like environment variable like that. That's usually defined in the Webpack config. So I don't think that's particularly unusual as well. So now let's scroll up and let's see. So we've got warnings there. That all looks normal. The build up above looks normal as well. And now we've just got a runtime crash. So scroll down and let's look at the runtime crash there.
There we go.
And that build output looks pretty normal. And so what we can try here is if you ever encounter something like this, there's one thing you can do right off the bat before going much deeper, and it's always a good thing to do, is particularly in a legacy project that you're updating. This could be related to a myriad of things. A legacy plugin, like this one's using NativeScript Sentry, for instance. I'm not super familiar with how up to date that one is, but there could be an issue there. But what we're going to do is we're actually going to swap our runtime. So since NativeScript 7, the default iOS runtime is the V8 runtime, and we can actually see V8 mentioned in the stack here. You can see it's asserting on V8 isolates, which are typically APIs from the V8 runtime. And so what we can do is we can switch the runtime to the JavaScript core runtime. And this is published on NPM under what's known as the JSC tag, which is short for JavaScript core. And so let's do that. Let's actually stop the run. Let's go to your package JSON. And we're going to switch our runtime to the JavaScript core runtime and then run with that and see if that solves our case. So 25 right there, switch 8.0 to JSC. It's a literal NPM tag, all caps JSC. And I don't know if caps matters. Maybe it does, but I think it is all caps on NPM. And now you can just run ns-clean.
So this is a tag that's on that runtime?
That's right. And if you go to npmjs.org, you'll see it there. You can actually pull it up and go ahead and run ns-clean while we're looking at that.
Sure, yeah. ns-clean, and then let's check out npm org.
And just type @nativescript/iOS.
There it is.
And take a look at the versions tab there, and you'll see it mentioned. Right, scroll up a little bit, right there. So yeah, JSC. JSC is representative of the last stable JavaScript core runtime, which is very stable, by the way. So 654 is the last one in that series that was tagged JSC, and it can be used on anything. It can be used on 7 projects, 8 projects. It'll probably still be used on 9 projects and probably still 10 projects. It's a very stable runtime based off JavaScript core. From 7 and beyond, we've started maintaining the V8 runtime. And it's easier to maintain, and that's why it'll probably be, well, it is the primary runtime to maintain going into the future. But if you encounter an issue with it on a legacy project or in any project, you can always switch to JSC at any time, do an ns-clean and give it a run and see if things are better. If they are better, you're totally fine to use the JavaScript core runtime. Things like that typically around the runtime, and let's go ahead and run the project and see if that actually was related or not, because we're not totally sure. But yeah, let's see if we get past that stack above. Yeah, typically features in the JavaScript core runtime and the V8 runtime are fairly close as far as feature parity goes, but there's probably still some edge cases and things that are still being, like, you know, detailed and fine-tuned with V8. So again, it's possible you can run into this situation in any project out there, and that's why there is that JSC tag. You can switch them at any time.
Well, it looks like we're on to the Xcode build.
We are. So it's looking promising there.
So all that issues we were resolving so far, that was all JavaScript and webpack stuff, right?
That's right.
Okay, now we've got on to the next stuff, which is related to the running.
Excellent. Yeah, actually, so this did get past our initial error there, actually, and we're to something different there, which makes sense. So if we go to app events now, let's take a look, because app events is probably using that delegate setup, and we probably want to just kind of revisit how it's handling that. Set native events. Let's go inside of that because that method right there is probably what's doing. Yeah, I see. So there's an iOS set. Perfect. So this is a great case, and this is why it's always fascinating to do these migrations from old projects because a lot of people do different things out there. This is missing. Can anyone guess what this class is missing?
Wait, I can guess. It needs an at native class decorator.
That's right.
Let's do it. Let's add that. At native class. Okay, and then we need to export it?
Well, actually, you might be just fine the way it is because it looks like it's being used there. So you can always check that. You don't necessarily need to export it if it's not being used outside. You can see my delegates actually set up when set native events is called. So I think you're going to be fine the way it is.
So this is an example of how you can get around not exporting that my delegate, but exporting a function that uses my delegate, and that's okay too, right?
Yep.
Okay. And is that the only thing to fix on this error?
Might be.
Okay, let's rebuild and see.
Yeah, so again, I can't stress enough on migrations and updating. It's always important just to breathe, don't panic, and take one step at a time, usually at the top of the stack down. And also try to note this, like warnings versus errors. Warnings are typically not errors, so you always want to watch out for things like that. Okay, perfect. Yeah, so now we're down to the next error. So again, we're taking them one at a time. We fixed the delegate issue, and now we've got one last error here, which perhaps might be the last error. So let's take a look at this. So it's talking about failed to load component from module app root. So let's see what's going on with that.
App root. I think we've already dealt with that one.
I think this is actually just related to a TS config setting, actually. I think what we want is to take out, we want to modify our TS config here.
All right.
Yeah. So this is something that's probably, I mean, this is probably more a TypeScript thing. It's trying to boot the app module, but the app root wasn't compiled. And that's probably because it wasn't imported like from a symbol because you're using like a string name in the module name. So you can take out, let's see, node modules from exclude, although I don't think it really matters if they're there or not. In fact, actually leave them. Let's add an include section here, and let's just make sure that TypeScript is including explicitly everything under the app directory. So let's put app/**/*. And then in our files, let's make sure that at least our references are picked up. And this TS config setting will vary depending on what like flavor you're using with NativeScript, because different front-end flavors have different TS config settings. Like Angular is very specific with TS config settings. It wants to point at the main, and the main is used as kind of the central entry point to kind of do the whole TypeScript compilation. But this is a vanilla NativeScript project, if we can say that. So add a files entry here. Since we're including all the app files there, we also want to just be explicit and make sure that that references.d .ts is picked up because that one's fundamental to our TypeScript compilation. And save that, and then let's give that a run just right there and see how things are looking.
All right. Folks, if you have any questions, type them in. And Jason says, I'm in the middle of migrating a project to 8, but was thinking I should hold off until Angular 12 support was released. Is there any ETA on Angular 12 support?
Great question. Yes, in fact, Angular 12 is probably going to be released tomorrow or Friday at the latest. We were trying to release it today, but OpenJS World was today, and there was a couple things that everyone had to do for that. So we've been testing a lot with Angular 12, and we did rewrite Angular 12 integration from scratch. And because of that, we were just taking a little extra time testing against a myriad of projects that we have in different setups to make sure that everything was taken care of there. So yeah, that's definitely probably tomorrow. And as far as waiting, yeah, you could certainly wait until that is out. Even if you did it now, I don't think would hurt you. You could certainly update now and use like 11.2 latest with those, and certainly go that route. I think NS Migrate, if you're on an Angular project, takes you to 11.2 um, in Core 8. So um, but yes, probably tomorrow or Friday, NativeScript Angular 12 will be out.
Sounds good. That's pretty soon.
Worst case, like early next week. But I personally am hoping it's tomorrow, Friday. So let's see, what do we have here? So app root, it's saying failed to load component from module app root. Let's see what else did we forget here. Let's check a couple things. Let's go back to, yeah, go back to VS Code and just make for certain everything is saved for starters. It looks like it is. And I'll check anything here that we can also look at.
And Jason says, great. Yeah, that is pretty soon. So looking forward to that for sure for the Angular 12.
I got to tell you, we are super excited about the Angular 12 rewrite. There's some new APIs coming to deal with modals using the Angular CDK, which that integration has never used before. It uses portals from the CDK, and it's going to be a much cleaner, much more stable, much more flexible way to deal with modals. But we're kind of introducing everything with the legacy API, the API that everyone's been using, and then we'll start to introduce some new APIs in this over time and deprecate some certain APIs in there to slowly move people to these newer and better APIs, particularly around like navigation and stuff like that, which have been a lot of issues reported over the years around navigation, and mainly related to kind of some unusual setups around kind of the router. So we're going to start to introduce some new APIs to deal with some of that stuff better. Let's see, app root.
And Adwia showed up asking, what are we doing here? Adwia, we are updating a NativeScript 6 legacy project to NativeScript 8. And we're doing a migration, and then there's a couple of manual steps that we're following along. Thanks for asking, and thanks for showing up.
Yeah, thanks for watching here. We've gotten into some interesting aspects here. This was a really old NativeScript 6 project. I think it was on 6.00, which a lot of 6 projects out there were typically on like 6.50, or at least the 6.5 series, but this one was on like 6.0, so it was particularly old. We've gone through migrating it and kind of doing some detailing to it to get it all updated to the latest. So we're down to one last runtime error here. And let's see, trying to recall on this app root.
It says failed to load component from module app root. Is this what it's talking about right here?
Maybe, but I don't. Let me check here on our branch. Let me just see. Some module name app root looks fine. Let's go back to tsconfig and take a peek at that one more time. Let's just make sure.
Sure.
Looks normal. I'll check the tsconfig holistically. So we've got module resolution, we've got app and include, we've got reference, we've got take out node modules to be certain. That's the only difference that I see. I really don't think that should matter, but take that out, save it, and try running again. Just want to see if there's any effect there. And then the other thing we can check is go back to tsconfig one more time. And scroll up. Let's see, module target, no emit helpers, no emit on NativeScript. That looks pretty normal. Yeah, that looks okay. And then check the package JSON one more time.
Here we go, package JSON.
And then scroll to the top there. We've got app.ts as a reference. That looks normal as well. Double check. Any dependencies look normal. The only thing you could try switching webpack to the beta tag. Let's change line 27 there to the actual, just the beta tag itself. Let's do an ns clean and run again. Pretty sure, no, the beta tag. So just beta. I'm pretty sure tilde brings in all the all lowercase. Yeah. I think the tilde on a beta series brings in the patches, but we'll do this to be sure and just make sure it is pulling down the latest beta. And then while you're doing that, we'll double check a couple other things.
All right, I did an ns clean and I'm doing another build. And folks, thanks for sticking with us. We are at about 15 minutes past the first hour here. And if we need to do this a little bit longer, maybe we can do another stream with a continuation of this migration. It, you know, there's a couple of little things here and there that we need to fix up, and maybe we should leave this for another time if we don't get this figured out now.
Yeah, let's see what we get on this one. And just so those are aware out there, we had migrated this one before. We have a complete migration on a branch that runs just fine. So there may be one small thing we're missing on our migration step here. It does seem to be related to the builder. You might search for load. Search for that load command again. Let's just make sure we got all of those swapped out.
Just plain old load, I believe.
Yeah.
Builder load. Yeah, I think that's it.
Okay.
Hmm.
And let's see. Check a NativeScript config. Let's just double check that as well. Let's make sure that references our app path. So NativeScript.config app and app resources. That looks pretty normal.
By the way, folks, while Nathan is looking at that, if you do like this kind of format, it's a little bit something new. We're trying something out here. Let us know in the comments after this video is posted or now, and we'll take a look at that. We'll see if folks like this kind of format and whether we should do more like this.
Yeah, the downside is there's probably a bit more waiting and delays for certain things, installing for node modules, and just kind of troubleshooting, but perhaps everyone out there finds that useful. Let's see, the last thing we could try is you can try putting, let me get the reference and let me put it in this, the chat log here. You can try putting, go to app.ts and at the very top, try putting this up there. Find it.
And for those of you that stuck around, here's a little gift for you. Come here, Axel. This is the guy that's been all right, okay, don't eat my microphone. Okay, this is the guy that's been coughing in the background. Sorry about him. He's a little sneezy. I think he's got allergies. His name is Axel.
So try putting this require at the top of the app.ts, and we'll just see
All
if it
right,
makes
let's
any difference.
require at NativeScript core bundle entry points. Hey, there we go. Okay. So let's build that again. And I saved that file. Yes, I did. Now, what is that? What is this bundle entry points?
Bundle entry points kind of relates back to, it's all the XML builder, so everything related to the kind of standard view markup with NativeScript, and it's possible that something's not getting included in the build because it seems to point at that app root, which, yeah, get to the top of that error stack. I think down a little bit further. See if it's still mentioning the same thing. And I seem to recall, I know when we first migrated this project, I think we saw this error as well originally when we ran it, and we solved it as well. And I'm trying to remember what we did now to solve this one. Failed to load component from module app root. The only thing reference that we have is tsconfig changes related to this.
All right, well, we might have to look at this a little bit later and take a look at what might be happening. But for those folks that are interested in looking at the project, here is the URL for it. It's actually open. It's on NativeScripting, on the GitHub for NativeScripting, and it's RPS Tracker TNS. There's the master branch, which is actually the NativeScript 6 version, and then there's the feature 8 migration, which is a fully migrated version.
Yeah, and actually you can see that commit right there. App root fail load issue on app boot. That's exactly that issue right there.
There it is.
And yeah, we have the resolution through tsconfig. The only thing that I can really tell there outside the other things. So
now with files, I didn't put it in an array. Could that make a difference?
Oh, is files? I thought it's in an array. Double check that. Yeah, is that just something silly we missed?
Yeah, I just added it like this. Oh no, you're right. It's an array. It's an array.
Yeah, I think that looks accurate there. Well, I tell you what we can do is what we should do is record a separate video with the solution on this, link it in the comments or the description as the final conclusion on the failed to load component app root issue. For anyone that's using standard, a lot of us call it vanilla NativeScript. That's really just standard NativeScript without any particular front-end flavor. This would be an issue that might be applicable to you in a migration.
Yeah.
This is an issue that's very isolated to XML files and probably the builder. Vue, Angular, Svelte, and React do not use those files. So let's do a follow-up video, Alex, on this resolution, and we'll link it in the description so anyone who watches and gets to that can get the full clarity.
That sounds good. And folks, do leave comments. We're going to check these under the video. And appreciate you all coming. Thanks for showing up and asking questions and interacting in the chat. We are doing this live today, and we're going to maybe do more live streams like this if you do enjoy this kind of thing. So let us know in the comments for sure, and watch for the follow-up video. And thanks, Nathan, for spending the time and away from your busy schedule on building the framework, and we all appreciate that. Working hard on building and adding features to NativeScript. Thanks a lot, and thanks for taking us through this build today.
Hey, thanks to everyone out there. Hopefully you picked up a few key things about migrating from 6 to the latest. All those steps are super applicable. That would be the way that we would migrate any old legacy project to the latest, kind of one step at a time. NativeScript CLI, latest install, NS migrate, then a modification to the CSS and SASS to remove the tilde, and then a couple touch-ups on your imports. And that is typically the before process. The rest is kind of just looking at project specifics.
Yep. So those are the steps, folks. And again, look out for that video where we're going to conclude this and take you through the project again in this more complicated scenario that we've showed you today. All right, folks. Thanks a lot, and see you next time.